Hello and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre, and I promised Joe that she would be with us this week, but she isn't because somehow it's Easter and some sort of Berlin role play is happening on Easter. What do I know? I don't know anything about history. So she's not here, but it doesn't matter because we have James T., a.k.a. Jim Reichert, a.k.a. Iliastra Ascendant, maker of a 360 camera system in Second Life, with us. And Jim, I don't recall if he was on a live taping once. Jim is also working for Microsoft, I believe. He'll tell us more about it. But let me do a quick intro spiel, and then Jim will tell us about his manifesto. Strong words, and it's important words that he has to say, and then I'll press him on them because these words in his manifesto, what we now call the Easter Manifesto that you can contemplate over Easter if you're celebrating Easter, as we often talk about it in the podcast, virtual reality is happening. A lot of people are talking about virtual reality as if it started in 2013 with the Oculus Kickstarter, which it of course didn't. And a lot of people seem to dismiss Second Life. Incidentally, a few days ago, I sent the Istanbul video that I made to a friend who works for a leading virtual reality company. And he's a really great guy, young guy, maybe his mid to late 20s. And I sent him the video, and he goes, wow, that's a cool video. I always thought, like, Second Life is just, like, about shopping and stuff and just sort of, like chatting and shopping. And I go, no, the user makes everything. And he says, what do you mean? And I said, the user makes everything that you see. It's a blank canvas. It's a 3D space that you fill with stuff. There's an economy. And then I give him my pitch or my summary. And he goes, wow, I had no idea. And here's someone in that field that does not know the significance of Second Life. I find that personally frustrating, but I also find it dangerous because people in this field that want to renew the field, that want to build new stuff that we're going to be interacting with for a long time to come, if they don't look at least to Second Life in a historical context, to find out what worked and what didn't and what works today, then we're completely lost. Anyway, please support this show. Very important. radio@draxfiles.com or ping the Draxfiles avatar in world, and we'll tell you how to do this. This is a community podcast. We depend on your Linden dollars, on your hard-earned Linden dollars. Don't buy them shoes. Support the podcast. Anyways, James Iliastra is here. Welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour without Joe Yardley.
Hi there, Drax. How are you doing?
Good. So you posted, and I want you to read it. You posted on Facebook a manifesto. I don't know where this came from. Maybe it was really kind of spur of the moment type thing. I saw it, or maybe you thought this through. I think it's really significant, and it's really to the point. So I want you to read it, please, and then we talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Just a quick thank you to people like you, Drax, who helped educate the public and help educate me. I'm very much in the thick of the metaverse. I'm very into Second Life. I've worked on the HoloLens. I've worked on a number of different HMDs, but I've always been interested in virtual worlds from a very young age, and you're a big part of my education in that. So I encourage everybody to watch your world makers, designing worlds. There's a lot of great media out there for people to learn more about the metaverse, and much of my education comes from that.
What's interesting is you are really one of the, I can count these people on one hand, who are knowledgeable about what's going on right now with virtual and augmented reality and have a very, very strong feelings about Second Life and a very strong sort of understanding of how significant it is. That it's really, you can count these people on one hand because it's either or. I mean, that's how crazy the world has gotten, I think, in that discussion. I mean, I bump into people all the time, goes like, oh yeah, I understand Second Life's nice, hang out and shop for some clothes for some old people, and that's about it. It's cool.
Yeah, as far as getting the Neo VR community, the people who are into HMDs and so forth, getting them to look at Second Life as a model for how to manage user-created or user-generated content rather than forcing pre-built stuff down people's throats like, well, I'm not going to. Okay, you know what I'm getting at. Anyway, let's just read this manifesto.
Let's read this manifesto.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of regrettable things in it as I read it a second time that you're going to ping me on. So let's just get into it. So here's what I wrote, and I quote, "I believe that Second Life has taught us that individuals can truly be valued for their words and deeds and art, rather than by their physical limitations, ethnicity, wealth, culture, political beliefs, or gender. Pseudonymity obscures all of that, and it's the single most powerful artifice in VR. It is as much a core underpinning of the metaverse as any piece of software architecture or thing you can put on your head or hands. I'm not interested in naming who will be the great disruptor in the coming years. The great disruptor will be a concept, an ideal, really, that humanity, writ large, will come to embrace. For me, the concept centers around the ability for anyone to create, remix, and profit share in a virtual marketplace, propped up by a common creation substrate, the prima materia, a single coherent framework of virtual Internet of Things. Fragmenting this substrate, either through manipulating time, hydrating and dehydrating pocket universes, waking and sleeping servers ad hoc, or by fragmenting space, sharding, or instancing simulations, work against this. These forms of fragmentation, while more efficient and more cost-effective, profit would have a geometric relationship with cost, impinge upon the concept of a shared timeline and shared universe. Running all areas of the metaverse 24/7, 365 days a year, on the other hand, would have a linear relationship. If we allow the forces that are currently propelling Neo-VR to fragment the metaverse, either through creating walled gardens of places and goods or through means I discussed above, it could be a while before we have a consistent, coherent substrate. We need to look for business models that promote a 24/7, 365 VR universe, a metaverse, where creation is an inalienable right and where space-time, XYZ T, is shared, or at least normalized over time. I don't have the answers to this, but I believe a dropping cost per flop will make the linear business model more and more viable, especially when market transaction costs, space rental, and other forms of value-add taxes are factored in. The bulk of the profits will be gleaned from the internal economics rather from the banal concerns of administrating the underlying substrate. The metaverse must be all or it is nothing. That's my manifesto, and I don't see anything I particularly regret in having said it. But we'll see what you have to say on the subject.
It's really well written, and I'm curious. Actually, I wanted to bring up the Facebook page. What were some of the comments that you got? Did you get some comments from people who are outside of our sort of obsessed debating this thing where they go like, oh my God, you need to see a doctor or something?
Well, there's a couple of people I really respect who commented. Well, besides my mother, who thinks I'm crazy, she tells me to dial it back a little. There's a woman named Freewee Ling,
right?
Who mentions that Kitely uses an on-demand model, resing regions on call, and this often requires a visitor to wait a minute or less for the region to instantiate, during which you are kind of sent to a waiting room. It does take some of the magic out, she admits.
Yep. Freewee Ling, real quick, I want to have her on. She doesn't use voice. Freewee is a great artist associated with the University of Western Australia. She was also resident artist over there, immersive artist in Second Life. That's a great point. That's actually okay. Read a couple more comments, and then I'll ask you a question.
Sure. I recently made a friend, Patty Hernandez, who I believe is quite the artist as well.
Oh, Patty fell for my April Fool's joke where I said Linden Lab is closing Second Life, and they told us in the closed Sansar group, and I'm sorry, I'm under NDA, I shouldn't say it. And Patty was like, "Oh my God, it's over!" And she was posting everywhere. I need to sell my Sims.
You should not do that, Drax. That is just vicious and cruel. I'll tell you. She says, for the user, the fight will be in what becomes an inalienable right. Boy, isn't that the truth. As wider adoption into critical mass spreads, I'm sure the powers that be will be looking into cashing in on grid teleportation and access to certain spaces. I think that's fair. I think Joe Yardley would agree. I think it's important that individual builders can charge for their work. The cost of this, plus the security required by individual users integrating wearables and wetware. Oh, see, she goes way out. She's a member of Singularity University, I think, is what is going to create a larger gap between those who can afford access and those who cannot. The world of access will be filled by bots with AI who, wow, this woman is right in line with my thinking. The world of access will be filled by bots with AI who will appear to be other organic users during social interactions. However, the marketing need to fill space could potentially risk a cyber war for those fighting for inalienable rights and open source. So I agree with her completely that because the metaverse is infinite, we're going to have to fill it with bots.
Real quick, for your manifesto, I jotted down here a few things. First of all, you're talking about this. What is really dear to my heart as well is basically the uptime, the 24/7 uptime, and that instancing, which is really all the rage right now. And I can say it because I think Ebbe said it as well, that they're working on instancing in Sansar, so it's not completely new information. I completely agree with you that while this is attractive for people who create games and then it's full and then they can create another instance, so they always there's never like a line at the grocery store basically, or at Disneyland. You can always get in.
The shared world, it's no longer shared. You're creating these almost, it's no longer a shared lucid dream. It bifurcates the universe. Well, not just bifurcate. You create a multiverse that can't come back around and reintegrate, because you might go to, let's say, I think you did a broadcast where you were going through an adventure, some sort of dungeon where it was like some Indiana Jones thing. Well, you imagine a whole bunch of people going through that and having a completely different experience at the same time and not running into one another. And you come out the other end and everybody's had a totally different experience. Well, you were there. I didn't see you there. And, all that stuff.
It's a really good point here, because it creates actually more silos. I mean, arguably, I'm not going to go deep into politics, but the silos that were created, interestingly enough, by all the sort of real name social networks, led us to a big mess, I would argue. And maybe the shared space that we all have to share, for better or for worse, maybe will lead us back into a more understanding, diverse society.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it. I just feel and know this to be true, but you bring up some really interesting points about sort of if we force ourselves to share the metaverse elbow to elbow, I think that can have long-term good.
Yeah. So for me, philosophically, anything that helps us to force us to kind of experience the other and kind of come to grips with it and respect it and open a conversation is really magical and important. So that's the one thing. Right now,
Neo VR seems to be very focused on how do we monetize this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how Second Life, I don't know its deep, rich history, but somehow they put creators first. And for some reason, they decided this needs to be 24/7. I think that they truly, and say whatever you want about Second Life and Linden Lab, they truly put creators first. I'm looking around and I don't see too many decisions where they said, we need to make sure this makes business sense first before we address user needs. For me, it seems like every decision they make and have made have been in the spirit of let's create a rich marketplace, survive off the table scraps, the transaction taxes and things like that, but empower the user to not only create but to sell their goods.
This is a conversation that came up with Maxwell Graf and Larry Rosenthal a few weeks ago, because how do you survive you are talking about, well, you were just talking about, for example, monetization and creation. So there's a few people in high fidelity that are enjoying it. Other people go, and other people told me they wouldn't touch high fidelity with a 10-foot pole because the marketplace there, you cannot monetize it. There is no, you can.
Oh, dear God.
You're very welcome to put your stuff on there so other people can download it. And I've been told many times that a currency and a system is around the corner. That was maybe 3 years ago. So, this is obviously a cornerstone in a world where you are awash in free content. You go to Sketchfab, which is great, and look, we give exposure to artists. Exposure.
I think they're doing us a favor.
Exposure, to quote my Second Life friend Eshi Odawara, I need to find that soundbite. She said once, unfortunately, they don't take exposure at the grocery store when you want to buy stuff. So
yeah,
we have these platforms that monetize that are doing well, and they give us this exposure, but there's no way to monetize it. I mean, granted, on Sketchfab, you can charge, but most of the stuff is free.
Yeah, you can set things up so it's not immediately downloadable. Like I've contacted, there's this archaeologist who goes around with a hand 3D scanner, and she scans like all kinds of different things. And I contacted her directly, and I said, hey, would you mind if I downloaded that? Well, I took her work and I made a playable conch shell with her work. And she sort of did it just for fun. She didn't think there'd be any monetization around it.
Right. If that's their decision, that's great. But how do we solve this problem where also TurboSquid is a place where stuff is really cheap? Nobody can compete with that. If I'm a modeler in my hobby, I cannot start a business that can compete with TurboSquid on those big entities.
Yeah, the Neo VR community has to mature a great deal. I think there needs to be first a common substrate, but and I don't think I'm giving away the farm here, but Sansar, when it first came online, one of the first things they did, besides allowing you to just upload meshes, is they made a marketplace. It was one of the very first things they did.
That's right.
And it attracted people like me. It attracted activators. It attracted the vociferous minority who understand that our work has value, that we're not going to give away our work. It's just not going to happen.
I hope we're not breaking NDA. Let me think about this. No, we're not. I think it's public knowledge.
I think this idea that someone's going to jumpstart a whole new metaverse and not have people like us, people who make things for money, if they feel like they're going to jumpstart this thing without monetization, they're out of their minds, because they're not going to attract the best and the brightest. The hairdresser who decided to learn Blender because she wanted to make things and make money on the side to supplement her income, and now she's brilliant at it. She's not going to say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to pretend like my work has no value again, and I'm just going to upload this stuff for free and anybody can use it. That's insanity.
This, what Sansar has, High Fidelity as the biggest competitor still does not have. On the other hand, you mentioned in your manifesto also walled gardens, and we need sort of this. We need interconnectedness. Now, High Fidelity is kind of pursuing that with their whole open source thing, and you can run the world on your own machine and stuff like that. So you must really like that concept, though.
Yeah, I like aspects of empowering the user and empowering the business person. And when I say business person, I'm not talking about these big businesses. I couldn't care less about them. I care about individuals like this hairdresser I mentioned. That's not just something I made up. I know of a hairdresser who runs a business in Second Life. She's embarrassed to tell her friends that she does it, but she pulls in a tidy income from it. She doesn't know how to explain this business to her friends, but that money is very meaningful to her life. And I want to enable people like that. If, people want to host, like Janus VR, if people want to host their own sim, I'm loving it. Anything that allows people to get into this world and share with one another and monetize those interactions. Because when I buy something from Jo, from her store, I'm enriched by it. I look at that and I say, look at her product and say, that is worth more than I'm paying.
Mm-hmm. I feel the same way. You interact with an individual that put a lot of thought and heart into this object. It's almost the decision in real life. You go to a small vendor who may be more expensive versus a big box store. And by that purchasing decision, you're also making decisions about your community, essentially. And again, this is something that Sansar, right off the bat, even in closed beta, really, they kind of prioritize that marketplace, which I also think is great. But again, now going back with the walled garden, High Fidelity on this other end, High Fidelity is pursuing a concept where machines that are run or hosted from everywhere, you can create your own world and you can interconnect it. Don't you think that is a much better idea than the closed Sansar system? Because Sansar then is kind of pursuing a walled garden system because they're hosting all the machines.
Here's the problem I have with that. It is a pretty steep learning curve and I'm just going to keep using this example of this hairdresser. It's a pretty steep learning curve just for someone to figure out how to build stuff in Blender. I don't want to make it standard practice to say, oh, and you know what? In addition to learning all that other stuff, and I'm a rapid prototyper, I cover a lot of different disciplines, so it's not as big a deal to me. But I don't want to ask an hairdresser, oh, and you can set up a server at home, and you can have it running 24/7, and you can wear out the disk drive and replace it every 3 weeks. I don't want that on anybody. I don't believe in a system, and I'm not saying, I don't know High Fidelity that well. I've been there. I check back on these places periodically. But if that whole system is predicated on the idea that these individuals are going to run their own service, I can't really get behind that. It's tough. I think it's empowering. I think it's very empowering for those who have the interest and the drive to do things like that. Because, I have the rapid prototyper mentality. I follow threads wherever they go, and I will learn what needs to be learned. But I don't want to be that demanding of creators. I want someone who's brilliant at making dresses, focused on making dresses, not running a sim.
But then we have the dilemma. This is really interesting because now you're talking about servers, and it took me, I don't know, the initial server. I had two friends of me with screen sharing trying to start the High Fidelity server. It is really not straightforward at all.
I'm going to have a hard time believing in a fragmented metaverse where, oh, I'm going to go meet you in High Fidelity. I'm going to go meet you in this. I'm going to go meet you in that. Now everything starts to feel like pocket universes or apps. When I go to Second Life, I feel like I'm going to a world that is infinite and growing and changing and evolving. And I heard something like there's over 150 terabytes of assets in the Second Life database. You look at the Second Life store and it's 3.5 million goods. That's just stuff that's for sale. You've got artists building, it's just wild.
We drank the Kool-Aid, and the listeners hopefully as well. So we don't. I could go on. If we would start drinking on this podcast, the podcast would be 10 hours long, and it would all be about how awesome Second Life is, because it is. But here's with your manifesto, I see then the issue here is the biggest problem, or the unsolvable dilemma, is that you criticize this fragmentation, and I'm completely on board with you because I want this universe that is a continuum. So we criticize the fragmentation, but then on the other hand, we don't want a walled garden. How can we create a metaverse that is a continuing universe, but is not dominated by one company and therefore a walled garden, and we're playing sort of in their sandbox, and if we don't behave, we'll get kicked out? And I have the answer. Oh my God, I'm just saying.
I think I do too, but I'm going to let you answer first and then just glom onto it.
The internet needs to go 3D, the internet needs to be VR, and then we're there. Maybe that's it.
It is kind of like that. If I'm gonna agree with you, and I'm gonna couch it just a little bit. I think the metaverse has to be a lot like plumbing. It has to be the most basic underlying simulation of the physics and the intercommunication that will need to create a virtual Internet of Things. As soon as we allow the utility operator, the people operating this metaverse, and you can call it just the internet if you want, but as soon as we let the people who build the utility start dictating what sits on top of the substrate, like they start building, you have to use our standard this, you have to use our standard that. As soon as they start building on top of it, where others should be building, where the community should be building, I think that's when it starts feeling like a walled garden. I think when they start dictating experiences in the substrate, then you have a problem. We need to keep it like Second Life, where you log in, right, and you go to a fresh sim, and it's just a flat plane. There's nothing. That to me is the utility. That is the metaverse at its most basic. And anytime you have a company running that metaverse and that starts building their own stuff on it and saying this is the way you're going to do this, then we have a problem. I recently saw High Fidelity posted a script where you could eat furniture. That is something where a company that built the metaverse but also wanted to tell people how the metaverse how you should behave and what should happen in the metaverse, that is dangerous. You will not have experiences that will be surprising, because a professional metaverse, if you will, where people are telling you, or they're crafting the experience as well, they're not going to say, I have an idea, let's have it so you can eat furniture. That's never going to happen. And a lot of the emergent art forms in Second Life, those are the kinds of things that you're never going to see in like a professionally promoted content within some other substrate.
Gosh, I couldn't agree more with you, because I'm also completely disinterested in the metaverse as it is used now for basically almost, I mean, I could be cynical and saying like all the stuff that I see around that people get so excited about is basically almost like a tie-in for a movie or something, right? People go like, oh my God, I don't know who I talked to, Dulce maybe, and I said, oh, what you're enthusiastically describing to me is almost like putting up the Hulk to sell Heineken beer in the grocery store.
There's these little snow globes. It's these little snow globes, these little tiny worlds, and they're saying, oh, metaverse. It's just like, no, that's a VR app. I launched this app, and that's the only experience that I can have. I can't wander off.
And the wandering off, and this is really well said, the wandering off is the beginning of imagining things and the beginning of the creative process. The creative process starts when you get bored, when you don't have everything spoon-fed. We're moving to a world. Oh my God, I got to get off my pedestal, because otherwise I'm not going to go down for 2 hours. We're moving, unfortunately, to a world of this ubiquitous entertainment. And Second Life kind of, interestingly enough, completely contrary to the public perception of Second Life. I mean, in my own life, everybody has these stories where people go, "Oh, why don't you go out and smell the flowers?" Or I have a first life, I don't need that. And then the same person that dismisses Second Life sends me 2 minutes later a Facebook invite to Mafia Wars or some stupid game. But I'm getting off a tangent. What I wanted to say.
That's part of your charm, I think.
My family.
Well, I think so.
My family disagrees firmly. But what you're describing, that the pipes, the plumber is selling you the pipes. It's similar to what's happening, obviously, with content delivery. When content delivery systems own movie studios, and then the content is made by them, and so on and so forth. We can only prevent that with sensible regulation that is basically that keeps entities small and separate and prevents mergers. There has to be a metaverse type of council that has some sensible legislation at hand that kind of regulates the metaverse.
Right, and I think part of that is deciding where where the plumbing ends. Like for me, the things that I want from my metaverse and the things that currently Second Life gives me that nowhere else does is I need to be able to protect my efforts. I need to protect my IP, which is, Second Life's permission system. That does a great job for me. I want to know that if I buy this lamp that I can turn on and off by clicking here or there or saying light on, light off, I want to know that it'll work in any corner of the metaverse. That's important. The virtual Internet of Things. That's basically what I'm asking for out of my metaverse and no more. So to have that.
But you also ask for a pseudonymity, which I think is also, we haven't touched on that. That's super important.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of opened my manifesto with how important that is because I run into a lot of people like this hairdresser. They don't, and me, I make dresses in Second Life. I mean, I'm kind of out and about it, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who make products that don't want those products to reflect on their real world self. You might have someone who's very buttoned up, but hey, they need to let off some steam and they make these products that are fun and whimsical. But they don't want that to reflect on their day job, for example. If they are in a position where they have to build a lot of trust with the people around them, they don't want to be thought of as someone who's frivolous and fun.
It is amazing that Second Life, in Second Life, by embracing pseudonymity, it's so fascinating to me that it's actually leading to much more authentic conversations, much more authentic relationships than, again, contrary to the public sort of perception where it's sort of just a world where people kind of hide and they're all weird and we don't know who they are. They may be like money laundering mafia people, terrorists, or whatever.
Well, there is that. There is a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's a couple of money laundering mafia people for sure.
But the pseudonymity is the single most important development in the metaverse, as far as I'm concerned.
But look where the trend, and this is interesting, the trend is going. And I'm involved in a project that is built, that is to be built on high fidelity with a major network. I can't talk specifics about it, but right now we're talking about avatars, and the advisors to this project have said, "Oh my God, we can scan people photorealistic ways." And my response was, "Wow, this is awesome." If you want it. If you want to have a photorealistic scan, that's certainly fascinating technology that this exists. But to limit, again, this goes to your point with the limitation, to limit a world like that, and there are efforts to do that. They go like, wow, come on in, then you can scan yourself and you're going...
That's 20th century thinking.
Yeah, exactly. This is forcing you almost even more narrowly than Mr. Zuckerberg has forced everybody to adhere with his real name policy, which serves him really well with the advertisers and nobody else.
We should just, maybe you and I, and we grab a few other people, we could just have a radio program that's 24/7, where we just go on and on about stuff.
Metaverse radio. There's a business model which is hard to monetize, but maybe we could monetize. I'm sure.
Cardo TV, Patreon. There's lots of ways to do it. There's Beam TV. There's Twitch. There's all kinds of ways to do this.
We're out of time. I gotta wrap it up. I gotta go to the Easter celebrations. I'm visiting my dad, and he is going to. I'm 46, but he's gonna hide some candy for me.
I'm 1 year older than you.
Jim, this is absolutely fantastic. This manifesto, we're gonna put it on the blog. We didn't even touch accessibility, which is another, I think, very important thing. We often talk about it on the podcast. Right now, the devices that are on the market and awesome are not addressing issues of nausea or even other sort of disabilities even, right? And there's a push to use voice in the new worlds on by default, because the Neo VR people from Silicon Valley tell us that texting is totally passé. I disagree firmly. I think there's also, it has to be optional. We can talk about this for hours, and we will have you back on the podcast. I'm gonna wrap it up. What else is new? Well, there's a bunch of things. There's new board members on Linden Lab. We're going to link to the relevant blog post from Inara Pei, who is the best blogger in Second Life. Sorry, Joe. Now you're number 2, but you're very close. Okay, so happy Easter. I'm sure there's a war on Easter somewhere. I'm going to go watch some Bill O'Reilly, what he tells me about the war on Easter. But... pleasure, Jim. Have a great weekend, and bye.
Bye-bye.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Time Portal, SL Artist, Warbug, Bay City You Know for Kids, 01 Heavy Industries Corporation, Extraordinary, Ionic, Maven Homes, Giza Creations, Botanical, Strawberry Sing, Abranimations, Eros Avatars, Caravel Design, The Cube Republic, What Next, Landscapes Unlimited, Fallen Gods Incorporated, and Death Row Designs. Thumbnail by Justin Esparza. Contact the show via Skype, Draxfiles, Avatar Draxfiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.